Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We have come to the lunch break on the questioning of Guy Taylor at the undercover policing inquiry. Guy Taylor was a founding member of Globalised Resistance, which was infiltrated by the undercover police officer HM118, who, using the cover name Simon Wellings, targeted the group. I'm joined by Sean Day, was a member of Globalised Resistance at the time, better known now as one of Real News. This is probably the worst quality video that he's ever appeared on. In an ideal world, Sean would be my producer in these matters and make sure that these videos look a lot better. But that's another story for another day. What have you made of Guy Taylor's questioning of the inquiry?
Hello, Tom. How you doing for starters?
Yeah, very well.
Good. Yeah, it's interesting, this stuff, isn't it? I mean, a couple of things that stand out to me. One is, and I have a feeling this has been going through the whole inquiry, but this obsession with violence.
Yes.
And this, and this sort of trying to portray, like by the police, but also the questioning as well, of trying to portray all these movements as violent organisations, and continually questioning when there's not a shred of evidence for this stuff whatsoever. I mean, there's plenty of parts of the anti-capitalist movement they could have had a look at and maybe brought that up. But even then, I mean, the whole idea of the police trying to portray all of our movements as violent, when every demonstration I've ever been on, every riot in history that I can see has started as a result of the police violently attacking people or violently doing something or violently doing something else. Even like the whole black bloc tactic came out of Seattle as a result of the police attacking demonstrations so violently that people decided we needed a defence force around it to deal with that situation. So, I mean, that's the first thing that gets me, is like the idea of the police desperately trying to portray us all as violent is laughable from the most violent gang in the whole country. The other thing that makes me laugh is this constantly looking for leaders all the time. And, you know, I mean, I kind of think, like, ever since I was sort of a young shop steward in my 20s and you'd have a picket line, every time the police would come out and go, who's in charge here? 40 years later, they're still going, who's in charge here? You would have thought over the last 40 years, they might have thought, maybe they do things a bit differently to us. But no, still, and all this like Guy Taylor, the de facto leader of globalised resistance, when he's constantly telling them over and over again, no, we had a committee, we had a steering committee with about 20 people on it who made decisions collectively. And they're still going about this de facto leader, you know, like Guy wasn't coming around to me going, sure, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I would have told him where to go if he had. And this whole idea that, like, one, we're violent, two, their leadership, I think it's sort of, you're portraying how you are and how your world is. And it's almost like they can't comprehend of another way of doing things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. It is been a hallmark throughout the entire process. They really do not get that there could be anything other than a very strict hierarchical organisation, and this idea that actually secretly there is this, as well as being violent, that there's like an underhand, like, secretive process within any organisation to plan the violence. So this belief that never mind what an organisation is saying publicly, what's putting on its leaflets, its websites, it's saying its meetings, there are secret meetings taking place where extreme violence is being discussed in detail. And that's what the undercover police were there to do, to find out. And we see in so many of these reports, we've seen a whole bunch of Simon Wellings, it's covered in Simon Wellings, HM118's reports of this idea that he somehow had a special access to the inner sanctum of globalised resistance, where very secretive plans were being made to do some very wild things. One of the ones I'd really like to look at in some detail is this supposed plot, which HM118 claims was done by who we're calling MT, who was an activist of Asian extraction, family history, who he claimed was planning to dress up as a suicide bomber and embarrass the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Guy Taylor's very clear. This was an idea that was brought up by somebody else, someone who, importantly, is white British, someone who's been referred to at the inquiry today as X, because they haven't given him a proper pseudonym. He says that it was something which was brought up in the pub, but he talked him out of. In like no short order, but he talked him out of it. He's somebody he's very close to. There is no suggestion it could have been confused with MT. And what we see in the report is 5 separate reportings of this pub event, which HM118 embellishes the point of the fake suicide vest having been created. He talks about the lurid colours that are on it. That supposedly there was a delegation that he personally was the one who talked MT out of doing it. He cast MT as an Arab, when in reality, from what Gaetano knows, MT's family history is from Pakistan. But as he said, it was an attempt to sex up this story to make out that a brown person was attempting to do something very serious. And that by stopping it, I mean, it was interesting. We saw a report by MT, by HM118, that said that the cost-benefit analysis of the deployment of undercover officers, the number one thing that the benefit was being able to stop this embarrassment of our restaurant. Well, I mean, what do you make of this absolute fucking story?
I was giggling all the way through this, really. I mean, I know the two individuals concerned who are referred to, like MT and X.
Did you ever confuse them?
They couldn't have been more different. Like Guy was trying to point out, they absolutely couldn't have been more different. No, like the only way, no. I mean, it's just the whole idea is ludicrous. But like even more ludicrous is the idea of Wellings talking anybody out of anything. Like obviously I came across him. Now you know what I'm like, Tom. I talk to fucking anybody, basically. I'm not allowed to swear on this.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, obviously I'll talk to anyone. I don't remember ever having a conversation with Simon Wellings at any point. The idea of him talking anybody out of it, he never said a word. He never said a fucking word all the time that I can remember. He'd be around, like Guy said, in these weird brown fatigues. I don't know whether he thought that was some anti-capitalist uniform or whatever it was. And he'd had this stupid smile on his face. And I don't ever remember having a conversation, like, not about politics, it's not about anything. And the idea of him talking to anybody in the first place, let alone talking them out of anything, is completely ludicrous on top of everything else. But I mean, I don't know where to start with it, really. I mean, the person who's been referred to who came up with this idea came up with a lot of mad ideas, as Guy said. I doubt whether that was the first time Guy had to talk him out of an idea that was just completely bonkers. Probably had to do it every week, at one point. I would think this is Wellings justifying his existence, basically. And justifying like the vast amount of money they're spending on deploying this bloke in, let's face it, an organization where everything was completely public. Like you didn't really have to do much digging. And the idea that there were these secret meetings going on. I mean, for starters, like this is not how stuff works. Like, I don't ever remember anyone talking about any secret meetings on anything because you can't plan stuff like that. Given that, as we've already ascertained, you start from a point where the police attack demonstrations. You can't plan how the police are going to attack you, so you know what you're going to do when they attack you. So the whole idea is totally ludicrous in the first place. But yeah.
So I've just been informed by the comments that the microphone I've been using doesn't appear to be working very well. I'm very once again the second-hand eBay microphone I'm using. So my equipment is not very good. If anybody wants to support this work, so I can buy a new microphone, I'll be very welcome. I don't know. Annoyingly, I bought a whole different microphone setup when I got some funding last year, but it appears that I didn't get a new microphone. So sorry about that. Yeah, I mean it really is like it's a justification, right? And he really needed one because from what we can gather, like you say, like nobody really, very few people seem to have ever had any real conversations with HM118, a cover named Simon Wellings. Like, unlike so many of the other undercover officers that we've looked at here at the inquiry, it doesn't appear like I had a Noel Douglas on the last one of these videos. He said, I would have considered him a friend. There were people who he did sort of befriend as part of the very beginning of his deployment. But it seemed for the majority of his deployments, he was very much a grey man who just sort of like was in the back of the room, collecting the leaflets, kind of having things to report on, but not really taking part in that much of anything, really.
No, I think that's true. He definitely would try and look like he was being really militant. So you would often see him at the front, like with his fists up, like chanting, or, if people were marching into a place, he'd be on the banner at the front. I think quite tellingly, he, like in the Evian demonstrations in 2003, which is where the video of of him that we put on Newsnight, like which I shot. It was actually quite rare to find some footage of Simon Wellings. I don't know if this is the same with other undercover police, but I remember like we were blocking a bridge to try and sort of shut the G8 down quite successfully at the time. Had the main bridge in Evian. We'd been there since 6 o'clock, and then a load of people came from the camp who were basically making up their numbers. They didn't do the actual direct action that we did of actually shutting down. And Wellings, like, inevitably was at the front of that. When I got the camera out, he's there going like that, and then he sees the camera and he suddenly like looks away and hides himself, but not before I've got him. Not that that was why I was taking the beam. We didn't know he was an undercover police officer at the time, but he was, yeah, he would look like that. He would try and look as militant as possible. But in terms of organizing anything or coming up with any ideas or, like I said, even buying around any kind of human interaction whatsoever, I mean, certainly I didn't have any with him at all.
Yeah, it's we also have been showing a lot of his reports this morning, and just that last section I wanted to have a look at, really. We saw a series of reports that really related to Guy Taylor's personal life, stuff about his living situation, the couple that he rented a room off, the relationship he had with a girlfriend, and then a lot of like kind of suggestion that somehow this relationship with his girlfriend was distracting him from his role as the leader of Globalized Resistance. I mean, as we've already said, you know, he wasn't the leader, but he was on the steering committee. And I mean, this is something we've seen a lot of reports of, like, kind of trying to claim that people were not doing their job properly, that there was disgruntlement amongst the ranks, that this person who's been reported on was, you know, on their way out, that what they were doing in their personal life was compromising their role as an activist, and other people were aware of it, kind of suggesting there was some sort of division that existed there that maybe somebody else in some underhand manner could push on and like maybe break up the group in some way. It's a familiar sort of tactic of the undercover officers. I mean, obviously you were around at the time. Did any of that stuff ring true?
No, not at all. In fact, I was sitting next to Noel Douglas in like when that stuff came out, and we would just look at each other going like, where's this fantasy come from? No, not so. I mean, the first thing I thought when I heard this stuff is, well, not only is this bloke an unapologetic racist, he's a misogynist as well. And you know, I mean, like Guy said, like he'd be late to things sometimes. Like we're all late to things sometimes. We're not exactly the most disciplined. You know, we're not exactly the most disciplined people at times, are we? But the idea that Guy would have to be waiting for his girlfriend to put her makeup on is, for a start, how would Wellings even know that if it even happened? Which I, you know, like, what was he like looking through the window at the time? Or, you know, like did Guy turn up and go, oh, well, you know what it's, yeah, I mean, the whole idea, again, it's complete fantasy, but it's the disgusting mind of a copper who hates women and hates anybody who's doesn't look similar to him, really, isn't it?
Yeah, like you mentioned the racism, and I think that was really interesting, the way that the way Guy Taylor dealt with the question that came from Don Ramble. Don Ramble has his approach to questioning witnesses at the inquiry. He's very keen on sort of saying, what if someone put it to you that in fact, and then like kind of presenting like a fairly outrageous position that a supporter of the undercover police might come out with. And one of them that he came out with was that HM118 says that he never saw any racism whatsoever while he was in the SDS. And you know, there's no examples of him being racist. To which Guy Taylor was like, well, I remember some times where he did behave in a racist manner. I mean, not least the what we would call the bad jacketing of MT when it was actually X who had come up with that plan, but also this time when he met members of the MST, the Brazilian Landless Workers Movement, and like characterized them as Colombians who probably had a big bag of cocaine on them. And I think, aside from the actual issue itself, I think Guy Taylor's done a really good job as a witness at the inquiry in, when presented with these banal questions, in like bringing out some examples, giving like some context, and like you're filling out the picture. What have you made of his evidence in that way?
Yeah, I've kind of wondered about this generally about all the spy cots. Of like, I do seem to remember like there was a Panorama program that looked at like the sort of police spies in the 70s and 80s. In particular, they confronted Arthur Scargill with Joe Gormley, who was the head of the miners' union at the time, who turned out to be a police spy. And then they confronted Tariq alley with someone who had been very close in their organisation, and what they all said about the people who turned out to be undercover cops was they knew their political history and their political, sort of Trotskyist history or whatever like that, because they knew they had to hold their own in political arguments. And now, like the current wave, or like over the last 20 years, he seems to just be able to turn up and go, I've got a van. Does anyone need any help? And not need to. You would have thought, even within that, you would have thought Wellings would do the basic bit of research to find out where the landless movement, who, let's face it, are a movement of 250,000 people, one of the biggest and most influential social movements in the world, certainly in Latin America. You would have thought he'd do that like a couple of minutes of Googling to find out what country they're from. To mess it up with Colombia, which is not only a completely different country, completely different language, completely different culture, is astonishing in itself. But then the idea that activists would come from Latin America with huge bags of coke on them, like they're going to be like, people are going to know they're coming anyway. Possibly there'll be someone on the plane checking out with oh, I know what I'll do. I'll take a big bag of coke. Nobody will notice. I mean, what planet are these people living on? And also his commanders, or whoever he was reporting to, did they think this was like amazing intelligence work or whatever? I mean, it's just it's staggering. Like, one, how stupid these people are, how lazy they are in terms of relating to the people around them, and like, words fail me at like quite how astonishingly stupid and ignorant and offensive these people are, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really comes across, doesn't it? I mean, I think that this point about like the lack of politics of the undercover officers, I mean, it has come through very strongly. There've been very few, very, very few undercover officers that have shown any real understanding of the politics of the groups that they infiltrated. I mean, like last week when we were hearing from Carlos Saraki, I mean, his complete lack of understanding was very much on show. And I did a reaction with Claire Doyle of the Socialist Party, and she said, oh, he didn't get it. He didn't get it, but he was very helpful. It was very helpful. And, when we were doing our fundraisers, he organized the import of like some Italian wine for our Italian nights. And that made a real difference. And he did a lot of cooking, and he was ever so helpful. He was such a jolly character. And I think that it really relates to something that Guy Taylor said when he was asked about the closeness he had towards a certain activist. And he said, look, if someone was involved in your organization and they're keen, you treat them like gold dust. Because that's how you build an organization. That's how you build a movement. And like, lots of people get involved who are keen, who maybe don't have the full understanding, and you encourage them, and you meet their enthusiasm, and you like show them respect, and you get them involved, and you hope that everything else follows from there. And that's kind of how it all works. And that's a sign of being a good organizer, is getting those people involved in that way. But yeah, I mean, it is quite. I mean, I think it just speaks to the laziness of these undercover officers, that they weren't willing to sit down and do the work, to actually do any of the reading. We heard from some of the undercover officers back in the 1970s who did some of the early deployments, of talking about like having to do some of the research, and it was, oh, that was pointless. I mean, there were some groups which had a higher standard of like political discourse that wouldn't let people in unless they were had a higher kind of understanding of things. And like you had some undercover officers who like said, oh, I did all that reading, but it was pointless because actually they were into something else than I thought they were. But it was okay. They didn't mind anyway, because I was a working class bloke. They just took me on anyway because there was a shortage of them. And I think it was just a case of people being, well, this guy's enthusiastic. Let's bring him through, But yeah, I mean, it is a glaring omission, really. There was a distinct lack of any sort of political understanding from the majority of these undercover officers. And the ones that I came into contact with, they really focused on being practical and being useful. And I mean, yeah, more fool us for thinking practical, useful people were practical and useful.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I do wonder about that whole, him like all the way through. Wellings is trying to put through this information of like he's one of Guy Taylor's best mates, and they got very close, and he confided in him. And I can't help feeling that like maybe nobody's ever paid him any attention in his life before. So it was a new thing to him, and. Maybe even his fellow police officers found him as boring as we did, and like never paid him any attention either, and just said, "Oh, just go and do that to get rid of him or something." But this idea, like you say, that by taking an interest in somebody, which I think we all do as activists naturally, and you spend inordinate amount of times with people and you try and explain things that are happening with, if they've got gaps in their knowledge or whatever, and you'll be like, the fact that they're paying attention to you, like it might be interpreted as, oh well, maybe I'm getting somewhere here, not realizing that this is how we treat everybody. This is how we work. This is a collective way of being where we value everybody. And again, this is probably a totally alien idea to police who don't really value anybody, and probably, probably hate their wives and hate their cats and, hate everybody else and think that's the normal way of being. But yeah, I mean, I'm staggered at how little information Wellings has put together out of that whole experience. I mean, there is so much just from the international events he went to, which was kind of I suppose that was the major part that I was involved in, really, that he could have brought out. There were so many discussions he could have been listening in on, that he could have got information on, and he quite clearly hasn't. And again, I must admit, all the way through that time, I don't ever remember, like he's going on about he has just the 100 pints a month before the other alcoholic drinks. I mean, what? Yeah, and then me bottle of whiskey. I mean, what was all that about? In that 100 pints, again, I don't ever remember, and maybe he was there, I don't ever remember him sitting around a table in like Genoa. I don't even know if he was in Genoa, but he's certainly in Evan. I don't remember him sitting around the bar in Evian. If he was there, he never said a word. If he was there, he certainly wasn't listening to anything anybody was saying, because he could have come up with a lot more fruity stuff, or he could have made up a lot of more fruity stuff based on what he's seeing out there. But nothing. I mean, I would have thought the SDS are even thinking, God, we wasted our money a bit there, really. He's come back with fuck all, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think they would have thought that if they hadn't had 40 years of guys who've been doing the same level of shite. You know what I mean? But just come back to this idea about, like, that the undercover officers, they were, oh, these are like my friends, because they'd never had that experience before. I think that came through very strongly with Jim Boyling a couple of weeks ago, who said that, the relationships he developed in the alternative society were completely different to anything else he'd ever experienced in his life, and that those people cared about him in a way he'd never known before. And what he really showed, I think, very clearly, was that he never had fucking mates. He'd never had fucking mates. Like, obviously, the people he worked with were never going to be his mates, because they're all cops, and they all, like you say, they all hate each other. They hate their wives, they hate their cats, they hate their children. But like, it blew his mind. It blew his mind that people were like kind of cared about him, and like, oh, that they picked up when he said, oh, you having a hard time with that thing? Are you okay with that now? And like, just remembering little very basic details. And I'm thinking, like, God, this is just common courtesy. Do you know what I mean? And he was like, oh yeah, the people in the alternative side, they're totally different. It's totally different to normal life. No, it fucking isn't. Like, it isn't. I mean, it just genuinely, I'd like to pretend that we're like especially really good people, but it's just normal. That's just normal ways of behaving towards each other. And like, yeah, I mean, like, it just shows how whacked out, how far out these cops are, that they think that this is something special and unique. And I mean, as much as anything else, it's just incredibly sad. I mean, it's incredibly sad that they've got such pathetic, wasted lives, with no value. And I mean, it's something which, like, I kind of come back to again and again when we're going through this whole bloody process of like reliving this trauma that so many of us experienced at the hands of these undercover officers. They've got fuck all. They've literally got nothing. Once their deployment's over, they're like bereft and lost and have no direction and no purpose in life. And like, they don't have anything to pull back to. There's a litany of failed relationships and bitterness and anger towards each other and distrust, and just because they never learned to be like good people or like interact with people as like with respect. They're all just so bloody pathetic.
And actually, like, Guy's first comment this morning when they asked him about Wellings was, well, he never bought around. And, even that, I mean, like, this way of being goes far beyond activism, doesn't it? We all know this. And even like the act of buying around, and the fact that we're all brought up in that tradition of like buying around. So it's all based around, at any given point, some of us have money and some of us won't. Some of us fall on hard times. Some of us are doing all right at the moment. So you buy around so that everybody's sorted. The fact that he doesn't do even that suggests to me that he hasn't even come up in that in that tradition of doing things. The whole thing of like, you know, going to work, joining a trade union, being introduced to collectivism like that or whatever. We have all sorts of collective ways of being as working class communities, especially, I think, which are just natural, which you're brought up with, and it's a way of surviving collectively against this whole system that we end up trying to fight against and trying to improve in the first place. And you do get the impression that people like that have just never experienced any of this stuff for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, absolutely, they really haven't. And on that topic of looking out for each other when we're all low on cash, I've just noticed that if you want me to get a new microphone, so that I'm going to try and fix this one first, obviously. But if I can't, I have to get a new one. Please support my work through the link you see on screen. Buy me a coffee. I won't spend it on coffee. I'll spend it on a microphone. So I thought I'd work in that small plug. Just also on that, I'll sort it out tomorrow, because tomorrow's hearing, which was due to be with Chris Nynham, is not happening tomorrow. His appearance at the inquiry is being delayed until the 19th of March. It will be just in the afternoon. I presume that means it'll be a shorter hearing than we were initially hoping for with Chris. I'm not sure the full details of why it's not taking place. I do know that Chris Nynham currently has a fairly high profile criminal case to do, well, a political case, but an ongoing case being prosecuted by the police for his role in organising some of the one of the Palestine solidarity demos, which, I mean, it is a sign that political repression has not gone away. Things haven't improved. In fact, things have got objectively worse. Just another comment, just saying, not a requirement, spend on whatever you like. Solidarity. Cheers, comrade. I mean, I definitely do need another microphone, mine. So whatever happens, I'm buying another one of those. I've just realised we've been on here for 25 minutes, and we should probably get ourselves some lunch. But
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I'm kind of just sort of sitting here flabbergasted by the whole thing, which I thought I probably would be. Like, you know, like we've been just laughing at the back, really. It's because the whole thing's so ludicrous. It's ludicrous in terms of how well he's portraying himself, but it's also ludicrous in terms of how seriously all these people, I don't know who all these people are, like tapping away on their computers and blah, blah, blah. And the person asking the questions takes all this very seriously and goes over the same point over and over again, and it keeps going back to violence and this and that and the other, and the whole thing just seems like a farce. All these self-important people and self-important, like, sort of institutions and structures, etc. And this is whole emperor's new code. So how ludicrous all these people are. And I'm not just talking about the police, but the judges and, you know, all these people who are asking the questions or whatever. And you can see, like, Guy, I imagine this has happened to everybody. After a bit, you're just getting quite impatient about being asked the same question over and over again. How can I answer it any differently to how I've had it? And can we get on to something a bit more interesting? So I hope they'll get on to something a bit more interesting this afternoon, because there were bits where I was thinking, "Go on, fancy a pint." You know?
One of your monthly 100, comrade?
Yes. One of my monthly 14, I think. Nobody's going to believe that, are they?
No, not for a second. I mean, like, I would say, I mean, like, Guy Taylor, I've got 100 pints a month. That's ridiculous. And I was thinking, well, I have come across a few hundred pints a month kind of characters in my time.
Actually, that's about 25 pints a week, isn't it? So it's about 3 pints a night. That's quite, yeah. It's not that outlandish until you add in the other alcoholic drinks that he had.
So, HM118, a fucking lightweight. So says Sean. All right, thanks for joining us. I'll be doing another video during the afternoon break. We'll be doing live updates on the on Twitter as we go through. I've just seen that someone else has donated some money on the Ko-fi, which is brilliant, because that's a sign that this clearly works. Asking, there's 94 people watching, only 3 of you have liked it. It would make a huge difference if people could like, share, subscribe, all those kind of things to whichever platform you're watching this on. It's live currently on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're also on TikTok. We were on Instagram, but I've noticed that phone that I was using to broadcast on there has died. Again, I'm just using an old phone to do that. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all again this afternoon. Bye for now.